So, Dr. Hill, continue with our discussion of inflammation. What are some of the causes of inflammation that you see?
Great question. So we differentiated between localized inflammation and systemic inflammation. From a local perspective, something as simple as getting a splinter in your finger would cause an inflammatory process. And the reason why that inflammatory process happens is to help heal your skin from the injury that was a result of that. So getting injuries like sports injuries, spraining an ankle, getting a cut on your skin, that will cause an inflammatory process. But when we dive into the systemic inflammation, the whole body inflammation aspect of things, you can imagine that if you're eating a diet that is full of processed sugars or other types of processed foods, not whole foods that have been minimally touched by human hands, that those types of processed foods would cause issues from an inflammatory status or inflammatory standpoint. And another point that I think is very important to consider is that if you've got a body that's riddled with inflammation, it makes sense that the individual parts of that body would be affected by that inflammatory process. So oftentimes we hear of inflammatory bowel disease, or cardiovascular inflammation, or what is popping up on the radar more commonly these days, dementia, Alzheimer's, mental conditions that are oftentimes an inflammatory process of the brain. When you're dealing with those types of things, looking back at that root cause is oftentimes very important in the ability to address it. And I know that we've dealt with that quite a bit. Maybe you have a little bit more to add about some specific things?
Well, where it takes me is in functional testing. The human body, everybody has DNA, and DNA is the computer. If you use a computer analogy, the operating system is the epigenetics. The epigenetics runs the computer system and makes it function. When you're taking and living in an environment like a computer's hooked up to the internet, it gets viruses and worms and different things on it that affect its function. You could call it inflammation. In a human, we have what's called allostatic load. The allostatic load are all the things that people get influenced by: toxins, GMOs, mercury, stress, vaccines, food, smoking, EMFs, all different kinds of things, Roundup that you walk through, that you spray in your yard. And what happens is that everybody has negative DNA in their body. When you take and get an overload of that allostatic load, the body has to use, it only has so much energy that it has to function on in a day based on what we eat and how our metabolism is. So if we get overloaded with this allostatic load, the body has to jury-rig itself to try to survive the day. And the effect of that allostatic load on the body is it goes into an inflammatory state which requires more energy. Thus, then the negative DNA many times will express itself. In fact, that's why a lot of times somebody later on in life will be diagnosed with a cancer or an MS or a lupus, and they've been carrying around that DNA genetically, but holding it in check. And it's the inflammatory state that the body gets stressed with that really makes it unable to maintain that normal function, and so it exhibits the inflammatory state and disease arises. So inflammation is all around us, and we have to constantly be eliminating the root causes of what's causing the inflammation itself.
Yeah, and just to round up the question, I think it's important to distinguish or to understand that from a diagnostic standpoint, you can call something whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, if you don't understand the reason behind why that is happening inside your body, it's a lot more difficult to improve upon it. So that's one of the things that I think our patients appreciate about this office the most, is that they get to learn about what those things are. And when they learn about it, that's a process that takes them down a path of not being able to unlearn it. They're responsible for it now. And it's a little intimidating for some people, but it opens up a world of difference for just about everybody that walks down that path. They get to make changes in their life, and they get to improve upon the things that they've been struggling with and hadn't, prior to their time here in the office, known what causes it or what to do about it. So we love that. That's one of the funnest things about being in practice at this office, is the light bulb moment that happens in people's lives when they learn those little tidbits about themselves.